one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Township of Aldridge Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting, November 7th. Notice of this meeting of the the Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting by properly posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting. Also by mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune. Finally, by filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk. Mr. Silverman, we have a roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Here.
Ms. Chevalier? Here. Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Gilbo?
Here.
Mrs. Gardner?
Here.
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Weiner?
Here.
Mr. Shapiro? Here. Mr. Watt? Here. Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mr. Darche?
Present.
Mr. Praska?
Here.
Board members, let me introduce Jay Weiner, Esquire, will be providing counsel for us tonight. Mr. Sachs is running a little long, and he will be coming in at some point in the meeting. So we welcome Mr. Weiner, and we look forward to your guidance, sir.
Thank you.
Those in the courtroom tonight, please, board members, silence your phones in deference to those who are going to be testifying before the board, so we don't interrupt the stenographer. This is taken down on tape, and it's taken down by stenographers, so if you are testifying, most of you are professionals that will be, please speak so that Debbie can get all that down on tape. We're on televised here locally on OBTV, cable TV, channel 15. That is normally run, the camera work is normally done by students in high school, so they're kind of volunteer positions. By their rules, that has to go up at 10 p.m. So for those of you watching at home this evening, and if you've watched us before, 10 p.m. we have to take the cutoff. If we're in the middle of somebody testifying, I normally don't interrupt them. If I get a break, I might in advance tell people at home, we are going to go off. I'm not trying to be rude, but those are the rules that we have to turn it off. So bear that in mind. Other than that, we're going to move on the agenda. I have changed the order of the agenda this evening for those who have a copy and aren't aware of that. After I go through the preliminary housekeeping issues, when we get to the applications, the first one up is going to be on the bottom, and that's Reformed Church. So we'll start with that. Moving forward, board members, item number 2 is escrow deficient resolution 18-18C, Rickett of New Jersey for $254. So moved.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Gilbo?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Board members, item number 3, one resolution, that's 25-19Z, Bennett and Maluk Shah, was in a denial. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a resolution of denial. This matter was application 25-19Z. Essentially, this was heard by the board on October 17, 2019. And ultimately, the findings of the board and the conclusions of the board were as follows. The board found and concluded that the C variances requested for side yard setback and combined side yard setback did not meet the standards required under the statute, cannot be approved. The board did understand the applicant's laudable desire to provide a ground floor room for an aging relative, but found that the alternatives exist to provide that room and maintain a garage without violating the bulk standards of the zone. The board also found and concluded that the variance requested for the side yard were a significant departure from the existing setbacks in the neighborhood, and although the applicant provided one example of a home on another street with a garage addition to the side of the home, one example did not persuade the board that underside side yards are the prevailing theme in the neighborhood. The neighbors who were most immediately affected by the deviation appeared to testify, and their concerns were found to be credible and persuasive. The negative impacts of such significant setback variance to the neighborhood and the zone plan were obvious to the board. The neighbors testified that the homes in the neighborhood have large wooded yards and that reducing the side yard to 11.2 feet, where 20 feet was required, would significantly impact on their own use and enjoyment of their homes and the feel of the neighborhood on the whole. The board found and concluded that as originally constructed, the house at issue was 29.4 feet from the side yard, and a reduction to 11.2 feet would be significant and out of keeping with the neighborhood. As well, the board found and concluded that the variances did not satisfy the C1 criteria. There was no hardship. The lot is large. There are clear alternatives for the placement of the addition that would not violate any bulk standards. The board found and concluded that the variances did not satisfy the C2 criteria because the plan proposed was not a better planning alternative. The applicant had options to place the addition within the building envelope, and the board did not see any positive justification for granting the variance. The board also found and concluded that there would be significant negative effects in granting the reduced side yard requested, both to the neighbors and the zoning plan in the zone. The board found and concluded that the variance is requested for side yard 1 and the combined side yards were hereby denied or thereby denied at that time. And therefore, the board is now memorializing this resolution this evening. We want to have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Reader. Board members heard the resolution. It was a resolution of denial. Someone want to move? But yes vote would be just supporting the resolution. Just so that's clear. Someone want to move?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stilgoe?
Yes.
Hours are 7:30 to 10:30. Right now it's almost 20 up, so we used up about 10 minutes. I'm sorry? Nobody really wants to come in anyway. As I said, the hours are, maybe not, 7:30 to 10:30. I'm allotting 45 minutes per application at this point. Should there be time left over from someone else, will be added on and shared by the other 3, or 2, or 1. I will go at this point now until 10:40 p.m., all right? 31-19Z Reformed Church Home. It's in the EDO 3 zone. This is for a preliminary and minor site plan with a D variance. Reformed Church is located in Reformed Church Home is located in 1990, Route 18 North. This is for an addition to an existing parking lot of 43 spaces with no change to the structure. Peter Klauser is representing the applicant. Mr. Klauser.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and professional staff. Thank you. Yes, Peter Klauser with the firm Halbram Pape. This evening I had the pleasure of representing the Reformed Church, the second time I've done so in town, with regard to their application. The Reformed Church is here this evening for a preliminary and final site plan approval to add additional parking based on a need that they have observed at their facility. In addition to that, we're asking the board, we're in front of this board and asking the board for use variance relief under a D2 standard because it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. We used to be in the OG zone where it was a conditionally permitted use, and then the town changed the zone to EDO 3, so technically we're a pre-existing non-conforming use. The building, the beds, staff, none of that is a topic of discussion tonight because we're not changing any of it. It is simply to add more parking to meet the needs of what has been a change in the industry. I have 3 witnesses this evening. Our first is Kate Shepard. She's the executive director of the Reformed Church Home. She's an on-site person that is there while the site is operating during the day. Kelly Osuch is our engineer responsible for the plans that were submitted to you and the rendering that was created and delivered to your staff today. And then Wayne Ingram is a professional planner. Like I said, we do need technically use variance relief. You are a zoning board. We have a planner here in order to give you that foundation, which I hope will lead to a positive vote on the application. So if I could start, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Ms. Shepard, have her sworn, and then indicate to you her relationship with the applicant.
Mr. Weiner, would you be so kind?
Yes. Sure. Ma'am, can you please state your name for the record?
It's Kate Shepard.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just in your affiliation with the organization?
I am the executive director, and I've been with the home for almost 20 years now, just shy of 20 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard. We sat in my office and I asked you, why do we want to put in more parking spaces. And you indicated to me that there has been a change in the way that this industry works, and specifically a change with regard to the increase in visitors, subacute and post-operative care. Could you just share with the board a little bit about how that has impacted your parking field?
Sure. Now that we have the subacute, which is short-term hospital stays, people coming just for a couple-week visits, we have a much larger increased number of visitors who are coming to see their loved ones. There is more staff because we have more rehab, more nursing to deal with the short-term population. So the number of staff has increased, as is the number of visitors.
So, and you mentioned staff, particularly your pinch period when it gets a little bit hard is the middle of the day when you have a shift change.
Correct.
So you have your second shift coming in, and they need room to park while the first shifters move out. And it's specific that you need to have the staff inside the building before they can leave the patients.
Yes. Where we're feeling that the crunch time is typically around 3 o'clock when our 7 to 3 shift hasn't left yet and our 3 to 11 shift is oncoming, but there has to be that nurse-to-nurse shift report that takes place. So that's really where we're experiencing a lot of pressure on the parking situation.
And to that end, this parking area that you're proposing is an area that's going to be dedicated for employee
Staff.
parking.
Correct.
Okay. And you're there, you're on site, your maintenance fella is on site. Are you confident in the work you did with your engineers that this is the relief that you need and this will be enough parking to satisfy your need?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's that simple. It's a change in an industry that has evolved. We've seen it in other locations, and I wanted Ms. Shepherd here to explain that to the board. I have no further questions. She's available if you have any questions.
Thanks. Let's see if the professionals have any questions. Ms. Sawant? Ms. Shapiro? Welcome back, by the way. Thank you. Board members to my left of this witness? To my right?
No.
Mr. Wayner, anything? No. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr.
I'll ask you to
Plaza?
step down, and if I could have Mr. Osach join me, please. Mr. Chairman, this is Kelly Osach. As I indicated earlier, he's our professional engineer. If we could have him sworn, and then I'll ask him to place his credentials on the record.
Sir, do you swear to, or affirm to tell the whole truth this evening?
Yes.
State your name, spelling your last name for the record, and then provide us a summary of your CV.
Sure. Kelly Osuch, last name is O''S-U-C-H. Work for ENLP, business address 140 West Main Street, Highbridge, New Jersey. I'm a licensed civil engineer in good standing in the state of New Jersey. Been practicing for, I graduated from Virginia Tech with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering in 2012, and have been practicing civil engineering in the state since then. I've performed and worked on site plans throughout the state over the past 12 years.
For zoning boards before, or planning boards?
Yes,
Many?
few.
Not in this
Not
case
in
here,
Old
though,
Bridge,
right?
no.
We'll accept his credentials, Mr. Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kelly, if you could just start by orienting the board, and more for the record, where the property is located in Old Bridge.
Sure, so the property is located along...
Wait, I'm sorry. Please allow me to interrupt. On the screen, Mr. Chair, we have a rendering which is here behind me to my left. And if we could, why don't we start by marking that? Do we start at A1?
One would work.
I'm going to mark that A1. You have a sticker, Kim? That's much neater than my handwriting. Now, Mr. Osach, referring to A1, which is up on the screens, if you could continue with your identification of the property.
Sure, so the orientation of the exhibit that's shown is north is straight up. So the property is located to the north of Route 18 with access along Route 18. There's a Marlboro Road is to the west of the property. There is an existing Mayor Manor independent living community to the east, and further is the hospital. To the north is a multifamily residential development.
You just indicate for the board what exactly is on the site right now and the number of parking spaces that exist on the site.
So the site is currently occupied and operates as an assisted living facility under the name Reformed Church Home. That doesn't propose to change in any way, shape, or form. There's currently 121 stalls, parking stalls on the site, 6 of which are striped for ADA accessibility, 1 of which being van accessible. Do you want to?
No, that's fine. You've had the opportunity to visit the site and confirm the existing conditions.
Correct.
And how many parking spaces are we proposing to add to the site?
So the proposal is to add 43 new parking stalls. By ordinance, they have more than enough parking stalls on site, but just based on operational purposes, as Ms. Shepherd just spoke to, they need additional stalls on the site. So we've come up with a plan that mimics the same dimensions and same orientation as the parking lot to the west of the site, or to the west of the proposed parking lot on the site, trying to mimic and make the aesthetics look and work properly.
So when we're all said and done, should this board approve the application and should it be constructed, how many parking spaces will we end up with on the site?
We will end up with 163 parking stalls, and that's only because one of the current ADA stalls doesn't meet standards and would need to be restriped, and in doing so, we'd probably lose 1 stall overall. But by doing that, based on the total number of stalls on site and the 6 total ADA stalls that would be allowed, it meets ADA code.
That's perfect. There are a couple of waivers we're going to ask the board to consider and grant this evening. We have a planner here, and he's actually prepared to address the waivers as well, but I'd like to have Mr. Osuch share with the board the waivers that we're asking for. So the first waiver that we're asking for is along the arch, the outside arch of the new parking building, under the ordinance, we probably should have a landscaped island in there. Is that correct?
By ordinance, yes.
And we're asking that the board not require that and grant a waiver from that requirement. Is that correct?
Correct.
And similarly, along the outer arch, some of the parking stalls are a little bit shorter. Is that right?
Yes, so the stalls are proposed at 10-foot wide and 18-foot long on the outer ring. On the inner parking stalls are proposed 10-foot wide, 20 feet long. The reason that the ones on the outside are shorter is for the overhang to the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk's wider. They're proposed at 6 feet wide.
So we have a 6-foot wide sidewalk. So if a car overhangs 2 feet, we're left with a 4-foot wide sidewalk.
Correct.
And that was designed on purpose
Correct.
that way.
Correct.
The last waiver that we're requesting is there are 20-foot high light poles in the new parking area, whereas I believe the ordinance requires 18 feet.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the plan has a discrepancy. The actual designed lighting plan has the lights mounted at 15 feet. So there's just a discrepancy in the plan. So I don't think we truly need that waiver, actually.
You told me that before
So
we started.
I would have told you.
Right, so I guess we don't,
That one
that
is-
we can
Right,
scratch
yeah.
that one out. So you're comfortable that
Yes.
your plan is at 15 feet?
It is.
And we meet it?
Yes.
Okay, didn't know that.
Sorry.
That's what they say, and when you're an attorney, you should always know the answer to a question before you ask it.
I found out.
Now, I don't know necessarily so much a waiver as an engineering recommendation from Pinder Sumal, who drafted the report. I know that we have Nicole Shapiro's here with us this evening, was a request that we consider and we look at pulling the horseshoe parking lot a little further to the west to give a little bit more room between the first parking stall and the stop sign.
Yes, that was a question that was raised in the comment letter. And the idea of this parking lot is to mainly be an employee parking lot with a little overflow use in times of high demand. So we kind of don't want to remove these extra stalls and/or shift the parking lot because the idea is to match what's currently there. And if we add the additional 7 to 8 feet that they're asking for in the comment, we'll end up losing up to 8 stalls on the site. And the idea really is to try to get the 43 total stalls that we're proposing.
And if you were to pull the parking lot back, it's more impact. There's more pavement. You're in an area where you need to be regrading anyway. You'd have to do more regrading, and you'd lose more of the trees that shield the site from Route 18.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, I have no, oh, no, I'm sorry. I do want to quickly jump through the comments in the report. There are a series of comments in the report that address the landscaping standards in the ordinance. And between the plan, the black and white plan that the board has and the rendering, you've supplemented some of the landscaping to add some more trees.
Yeah, so we've added additional trees in the landscaped islands, added a few shrubs or additional shrubs along the outer ring that faces the entry drive. And then in that little cutout area of the trees, we're adding additional tree, or proposing additional trees in there. And I actually looked at the plans this afternoon, and the reason that was proposed to be cut out, the trees like that, was for grading. And I think we can tweak the grading a little bit to pull that proposed tree line further back and reduce the impacts on that line.
To that end, Mr. Chair and board members, I reached out to Ms. Sawat with regard to her requirements for landscaping, and I told her that we would bring a rendering that showed some more landscaping, and that we would also be comfortable working with her offices if the board saw that was fit as a condition of approval, and make sure that she's happy with what we put out there. There is a couple of comments in the engineering section of the report with regard to the maintenance manual, and you have no issue updating the maintenance manual.
No.
And I'll make sure that a copy of the maintenance manual gets recorded as a restrictive covenant, so that's part of the chain of title, which was also a request.
Therefore, we can consider that a condition should the board so approve the application.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll draft one and send it to Mr. Sachs's office to review, to record that maintenance manual. With regard to outside agency approvals, I'll apply to the county if the board should grant the application when we have a use variance. Just as a matter of course, we usually wait to hear from the board whether we're approved, and your offices will take care of freehold soil. Is that correct?
Yes.
We don't believe that the MUA would have anything to do with this application, considering there's no new utilities. And I don't see any other outside approvals that we'll need as part of this. Obviously, there'll be permits from your construction department. I have no further questions of Mr. Osach. He's available to the board to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Shapiro, are you going to weigh in on this? Or?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead then.
I just wanted to talk about a little bit about the handicap spaces. I was confused because the plan says 166 total spaces, and then it said 2 are existing, 2 are required.
Yeah, so I think the original survey didn't accurately show the ADA stalls. I went out to the site on Tuesday and we mapped them out, and the correct or existing layout is shown on the new rendering, and we would update the plans accordingly.
Okay, so did I hear you correctly? Now it's not 166, it's 163 spaces?
Would be the total proposed at the end, yes.
Okay, so from my recollection on ADA requirements, I believe it would be 1 space per 25. So I think you're rounding up to 7 spaces. Am I correct? Did I hear you say 7 before?
No, I said 6 total.
Okay, so I would then say, you should show 7 handicap spaces for the site.
Okay, we'll add the additional
Okay.
ADA stall.
There's a comment in the letter that talks about lighting, and it says pursuant to section 250-75E, the height is sort of in question. When we look at your detail, the height of the pole is 20, I'm sorry.
Right, and that's where the discrepancy is. On the actual lighting design plan on sheet, I'll just go to the plans here. Sheet 8 shows the actual illumination detail.
Okay, so, but what I'm saying is because Old Bridge Township, the height required can't exceed 18 feet.
Right, so
Will you
there's
decrease?
there's a discrepancy between the detail and the actual design. The design was at 15 foot.
Okay.
And the detail shows it at 20. The light will be brought down to 15 feet.
Okay, and then, so these foot candle readings that I'm seeing is for 15 feet?
Correct.
Okay, and then within the parking lot, the minimum foot candle reading should be no less than 1.
No less.
So if you take the entire drive aisle almost, it's less than 1. So I suggest that probably at the bullnose of the island, you add probably 2 additional lights. In the center, island that goes from your main drive into that new parking area, you have two poles on either side of the sidewalk. Do you see that?
Yes.
I would suggest, and Debbie, this is on lighting plan sheet 8 of 12. I would suggest perhaps one pole with 2 luminaires on top to eliminate the extra pole, right?
Yes.
Sidewalk illumination for foot candles should be a minimum of 0.9 foot candles. So while you're meeting the existing sidewalk, do you see how we're down to 0.7, 0.3? So I would just take a look at the entire sidewalk and make sure you meet the 0.9 foot candle reading.
Okay, but I should clarify that this doesn't take into account the existing lights that are on site as well.
What I did on my plan, especially at the driveway entrances into the new parking area, I circled where you don't meet it, but I also circled the light fixtures that are across the driveway.
Okay.
I asked that when you bring in the second iteration, anywhere that you have existing lights to help your case,
Yep.
submit that to us so we know that you meet the criteria. Any illumination standards are found in Appendix K of our land development ordinance.
Okay.
I'm okay with the parking stalls being short. I was at first, when Vina and I had talked about this application, especially because, Pinder Sumal had written the report and he was not available to attend tonight. So I was playing catch-up. I'm glad that the sidewalk is 6 feet because I worry about that overhang. So with that 6-foot sidewalk, I feel comfortable with the stalls being shortened and not meeting our standards. One of the comments that Vina had in her landscape section, and it was the same comment I had, and that was pulling back the grading on that wooded area that you're disturbing. I think you were trying to give yourself some room when you were doing construction and putting your stockpile area there. Is that what I?
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to that earlier on the rendering. We can pull the grading back and tighten up the proposed tree line, and then we're also, on the rendering, we're going to propose additional trees in the clearing area.
Okay, and just know that our conservation officer has to take a look at this application, especially the trees that you are removing from the site, to make sure there's no heritage trees there, and you have to formally submit for a tree removal permit in addition to anything that goes on this night. My last comment is, Mr. Sumal, in doing me the favor before coming back, had really rushed through this application review. I ask that if the board looks favorably on this application, to give me a little bit more time to look at the stormwater management report, that it was so detailed. I just want to make sure that, the client is protected, the township is protected, especially because it's an existing basin. They are modifying it to add to it the additional drainage from the parking lot. But I do agree with Mr. Sumal in that if you shift it, that, 7 feet or 8 feet, you're increasing the throat on the entrance and the exit to the main driveway. When you're entering the parking lot from the main street and you want to turn left, if somebody turns left and somebody's coming and another person wants, you have to give that person the ability, to stack at least one car. So giving that throat is a good suggestion. Adding, 6 or 7 feet of additional impervious cover, to me, I think the total impervious that you're adding is about 0.6 acres. It, to me, is not a big ask on it. So I would ask that you take a look at that. It does make the semicircle at the end of the parking lot not line up with the one to the parking lot to the north. I see that, but, I don't think it's going to look out of character. Nobody really, when they're pulling into this parking lot, will look at it at plan view like we do, So they'll see the semicircle and they'll think it's just the same as a semicircle, north of this parking area. And that's all.
Let's just get that all down. Mr. Clauser, the applicant agrees with excuse me, all the things, the aforementioned, right? The extra handicap spot, the one pole's gonna go, the lights are at 15 feet. The the foot candles on the sidewalk, and you're gonna, she'd like a little bit more time, even for the stormwater manager to absorb that. I mean, no pun intended, to read up
Good, I
on
missed
it
that.
and approve. That was quick, right? That's okay with the applicant?
Let me recap. I think that you're going to tell me that meeting the light standards are not an issue.
That's not an issue,
Not a
yeah.
problem. And then certainly with regard to the stormwater management, we are touching the basin, we're affecting it, and I don't think they're going to have any issue working that out, making sure that we make Nicole happy at part of resolution compliance. Wouldn't have any issue.
Applicant would agree to cooperate and work with staff in the future?
Sure,
if
sure.
this matter were...
Yeah, and I mean, I think that would be part of any resolution compliance review anyway. So that's,
The handicap spot?
how about we'll make sure that we meet ADA requirements. There was some discussion that when you get to a certain number, the 1 per 25 maybe dilutes, it changes. When you get over a certain number, it starts to become 1 per 50, or something like that. But whatever it is, we'll meet the ADA
Board
requirements.
feel comfortable that you'll agree to agree, and then
Yeah.
both of you will
Yeah,
come
I
to some
don't,
number.
I don't want in
If
the
it's 6 or
resolution,
7,
it'll be what it's supposed to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what other matter? There was one other thing we forgot?
No, the foot candle reading was
Okay.
along the sidewalk
Yep.
and in the drive aisle.
Right, yeah, and that'll be met. And
One pole's going.
I think it sounds like we
One
have,
pole,
I
one
was just
pole's
trying to
gonna-
save money
Yeah.
for the applicant.
Yeah.
it sounds like we have room, if we're at 15 feet and the standard is 18 feet, we have a little bit of room to raise some lights, which can give you some more foot candle, and we'll have some room to add lights, so I'm sure we can take care of that. We wanted to avoid redesigning the location of the parking lot. I get it, I understand, under normal, in a shopping center, in an area where it's a little more heavily trafficked. This is supposed to be a controlled parking lot. This is going to be our designated employee parking lot. We weren't overly concerned with the conflicts because it is the two, it's at that shift change. So we're going to do what the board feels is appropriate, but we were looking to lessen the impact. Really, I think it was in the grading and the trees in the front. It's not that we're adding more impervious coverage, because I think Nicole's right, 7 or 8 feet is a drop in the bucket compared to the parking lot. That's all wood line there, and we're already cutting it back, looking to reduce the amount that we're going into there. So I would ask the board consider that in how they want to direct the design.
Is it primarily to be used by employees?
Yeah.
That's the whole concept.
The whole reason we're here is
Are you going to
because
sign it? the
that'll be
employees?
designated as employee parking area. That's correct? Kate, am I
And the
speaking-
employees obviously will cooperate with.
Well, that's what we figured.
whatever
It's
the-
people that we have under control. There are
I'm saying, Ms.
employees.
Shepherd will ensure that the memo goes to them to cooperate and park there.
Right. And they're starving for this. The employees want this because they need a place to put their car when they're trying to get into work.
Okay. Mr. Watt?
I believe Nicole has already covered most of it, but I just want to shed some light on the landscaping. I did have some concerns originally because there were 57 trees being removed, and Mr. Klauser and myself, we spoke and we decided to amend or work on the landscape plan. The landscape plan came in this morning, so I would just recommend that as part of the condition of approval, the applicant work with the planning office and our township arborist to come up with a plan that is acceptable. I believe that in spite of the changes in the landscape plan, the applicant might need a few waivers on some of the design standards which were already mentioned in the review letter. I think it's section 250-77A2F, wherein after every 10 spaces, an island is required, so that would be a waiver. And I didn't hear information on the last comment, that is FE, where 20% of the parking area should be landscaped. I didn't have information on that, and I would rely on the engineer to testify. Do you meet that standard? I don't believe so. And you might need a waiver on that.
Yeah, I don't believe we meet that standard. I think the spirit of the revisions to the landscape was that maybe technically we need a waiver on there, but we were comfortable working with Venus office to make sure that there was a good balance between landscaping and also, getting as many parking spaces as we can in as small of an area as possible to meet the needs of the applicant.
Would we be safe to work, if approved, go with a waiver, even if
Yes.
it's not going to be necessary?
Yes.
Agree?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Anything else, Mr. Swan?
That's it.
Board members to my left of this witness? Board members to my right? Mr. Weiner, anything?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Plaza?
Mr. Osuch, you can step down. I'd ask Mr. Ingram to come up. My next witness is Wayne Ingram. He's a professional planner. I could have him sworn, and we'll have his credentials placed on the record.
One moment, do we want to just quickly announce for the record?
Mr. Stoner is now on the dais, board members.
Sir, can you please raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, that all your testimony will be truthful this evening?
I do.
And can you please state your full name for the record, spelling your last name, and then provide the board with a summary of your CV?
Sure. Wayne Ingram, I-N-G-R-A-M, also employed by ENLP. I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, have been licensed so for over approximately 8 years, also licensed engineer and surveyor. I've appeared before over 50 municipalities in that capacity, most locally North Brunswick, South Brunswick, New Brunswick,
Accept his
Jamesburg.
credentials.
Thank you. Mr. Ingram, you've heard the testimony this evening. I've identified the fact that we have some variance relief, a D2 variance relief, and there are a handful of waivers that were discussed in front of this board. Perhaps in a narrative fashion, if you could take the board through the variance relief that's required and the proofs for it.
Sure. Primarily, I was looking at the D2 variance for the expansion of a non-conforming use. This is a unique scenario because we're not really asking to increase the intensity of the development. The issue we have here is probably best summed up in your fire official's memo. It's about time. We have a lot of parking that takes place in the aisles, which ultimately could be a safety concern for access if we have ambulances, fire trucks that need to come through. What you've heard is this is due to a shift change, requirement that staff be on site. And so these are vehicles that are already utilizing the site, and we understand we meet the parking requirements, but the reality is that as the use has evolved, the need for additional parking exists. So really, in my eyes, this isn't really an expansion per se because the vehicles are already there. We're just actually improving the nonconformity by allowing them to park in a manner which is legal, safe, and better designed than allowing them to park in the aisles. So, in that effect, I think it creates better harmony within the zone. You've heard initially what the surrounding uses are, and I would say that, the use itself is very compatible with that. I think there are various purposes of zoning which are furthered by the application. Purpose H, we're improving traffic and circulation, certainly, by getting those vehicles out of the drive aisles, which also serves Purpose B, which is, in my eyes, one of the most important, in that we're preserving from safety, from fire or other disasters. If there's ever a concern at the building where emergency personnel need to get to this property, we want to make sure that there's no obstructions with vehicles parking in the street because they can't find a parking spot. So this will alleviate that concern. And finally, I think we're also serving Purpose I, improving the aesthetics of the site. I think an orderly arrangement of the parking in which we try to suitably landscape the property to your professional satisfaction will be an improvement to the property as it exists. I did not see any negatives with the application in that we're trying to minimize our disturbance and our impact to the site. There's no other impacts. We're not creating any additional traffic. It's already there. And we're not really doing anything that's going to affect any of the outside properties. Arguably, the area of the parking is not even going to be visible from outside the site. When I recently visited, the property itself is generally well screened. So for those reasons, I believe that the criteria has been met for the granting of a D2 variance and would support approval of the project.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Ingram. He's available to the board.
Mr. Swan?
I have no questions.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to go back to the parking lot, the curb radii, and it's not of this witness, but the curb radii up front are less than the 5 feet, so it would require a design waiver should the board look favorably on keeping the parking lot where it is and not changing it. The curb radii in the front are 3.5 and 4, and so in section 250-77 for off-street parking in the LDO, section A, G, it says curb return radii adjacent to traffic flow shall be a minimum of 5 feet. So I would then add that waiver on there.
Plaza?
Yes. Yeah, I would ask if the board, the design that we're presenting and the design that's been supported by the testimony is what we're asking for, if that technically requires a waiver. But I think we're also going to be working with both Nicole and Vina to make sure that this looks right and works right.
Did you have any questions for this witness? No. Okay. Board members on my left for the planner. On my right. Mr. Wynn? Nothing. Mr. Clauser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. This is an application where the applicant themselves have recognized a need. They've worked very closely with Mr. Hart on the site to keep up the safety measures as they are now. Safety is important. Safety is important everywhere. Safety is very important at this site, and this alleviates any of the parking in the aisles and jamming up any of the roadways that would require either ambulances or fire safety to get there. So I think it's a beneficial application, and I would ask the board to recognize the need and the applicant's attempt at being efficient in creating the parking on the site. That's what a lot of the waivers and relief stem from, and act favorably on the application.
One thing I was going to mention, Mr. Lavallo is not here tonight, but you will meet with him in reference to removal of any trees, correct?
We have to, when we get done with this, you have a separate permit application which we will apply for.
Okay, very good. Mr. Hart? Yes, sir. Comments on the application? I know your letter is a matter of record. Personally, you want to comment?
No, I would just like to echo we do have some issues in the afternoon getting in there. With Ms. Shepherd, we're trying to work with not striping the whole site yellow. So this would help immensely, especially at that shift change.
Looks like a good plan to you?
It looks like a great plan. And I don't see an impact of stacking, and the volume of people going in and out of there at the same time is not there.
Okay.
Okay?
You've been there, and I guess have seen this, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You have no further witnesses, right? You mind if I go to the public?
No, oh no, please do.
Right, this is matter 31-18Z. It's the Reformed Church Home located at 1990 Route 18 North. Anyone here in the chambers tonight want to be heard? Please raise your hand and come forward. No one has. I'll close the public portion. Ms. Shapiro, if I'm correct, and Ms. Sawant, we have D2 for the expansion of pre-existing non-conforming use. Should that be passed, we have design waivers. The parking island, correct? The 10 by 18, the 10, was there 10 by 18?
10 by 18 stalls.
The landscape waiver, correct?
Yes.
And then now a curb radii, right?
Yes.
So there's a total of four more waivers, right? No bulk?
I don't believe there's any bulk
Pre-existing
variances.
condition.
Right.
Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, board members, absent any questions, before we call for a vote, any final comments from anybody on my left or on my right? None? We have in front of us a D2 for expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use. Someone in favor of moving?
Motion approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
As to D2, roll call.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Gilbo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. All right, as to the waivers, we can do them all together, Mr. Weiner, because
Yes.
I've already put them on the record. They're a matter of
I would
record
say unless
anyway.
there's a member of the board who wants to pull one particular waiver, maybe we could ask that now. If not, do it in one vote.
Board members, as I said, was the parking island waiver, the 10 by 18 stalls, which overhang onto the sidewalk to
Mr.
provide the
Chair,
extra two.
is there more than 10?
It's just a 10 by 18 stall. That wasn't the number of
I know-
stalls.
oh,
It's
okay.
just the
There's
outer-
more.
It's
the
10 by
outer
18,
ring.
but they're not all that way.
No, they're not
How many
all
are?
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many are?
The ones that aren't are the ones on the interior that have the central aisle. It's all the ones on the outer perimeter.
As shown on the
Okay,
plans.
as shown on the plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Everybody understand that? Okay, so there's the parking island, the 10 by 18 stalls, the landscape waiver, the design waiver for the curb radii. Everybody got that? All good? And of course, the stormwater management manual was going to be a matter of record, correct?
Yes.
All right. Anybody have any problem with any of them? Someone want to move the waivers?
I'll move them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewar?
Yes.
Ms. Beldel?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
From all the public safety issues that I've heard and that have happened there, and I've heard great things about the Reformed Church. Personally, I know some people that are infirmed there, and I think you're doing the right thing for your employees and getting these cars where they should be properly parked. And certainly my vote is yes.
And we have the site plan as well,
Yes, you do. You have preliminary, major, we should do.
preliminary and final.
Preliminary and final, we do preliminary and final?
We
at
can
once?
do them together.
Okay, major site plan with D variance. As to preliminary and final major.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
Mr. Connor? Roll call.
Mr. Dewar?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Beldel?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Clausen. and
Thank
all
you
your
very much.
witnesses
Thank
this
you.
evening.
Have a lovely evening.
Happy Thanksgiving in advance.
That's right.
Mr. McGowan, Fogley is going to be on next, all right? Just a couple-minute break for the stenographer. We're not going to leave the dais unless you need a break as well, Deb. Next matter for the evening is 28-19Z, Fogley Industrial Properties LLC. This is located in the SD1 zone at 20 Industrial Drive. This is for a second-floor addition of 1,550 square foot. This is seeking preliminary and final major site plan with 3 variants. Applicant is being represented by Robert McGowan, Esquire. Sir.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you. The applicant, as was just stated, is Fogley Industrial Properties. We were here about 3 years ago, 2016, when Mr. Fogley had transferred his business from Woodbridge to Old Bridge, and we received site plan approval back then. And he was adding a boiler room to his place. Since then, fortunately, he has grown with Old Bridge. His business has grown and been successful. To the point where he now needs to add administrative and office space. What he wants to do is add it over an existing footprint, add a second floor over structure that he already has. Other than that, he's really not proposing any changes to the site at all. There were various issues that were brought up and which we will address tonight, but basically we're simply asking to add 1,500 feet of office space to the existing building by adding a second floor. I am aware of a couple of comments that have been received from staff. I have one from Patrick Reardon, the construction official and fire subcode official. He finds it to be satisfactory. Obviously, we accept his comments. I also have a Bureau of Fire Prevention from Tom Garrity. He also indicates that it's conceptually satisfactory, and I thank him for that and accept his comments. And then, of course, we have the review letter, which is a joint review letter from Planning and Engineering, and those we will address this evening. With me this evening is John Vincenti, who is both a professional engineer and professional planner. He is going to address the engineering issues on this and the planning issues on this matter. And then with us also is the owner, who will testify to the purpose why he needs to expand, which is one of the questions that was asked. And he's also going to talk about the trailer parking that exists in front of the site and why that happens and why it's so essential to his business. So if I may have Mr. Vincenti sworn in and accepted, he'll address the issues in the review letter.
Yes. Mr. McGowan, you're proffering this witness as both an expert in engineering and planning?
That is correct, and he is licensed as both.
Sir, if you can kindly first raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth this evening?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and if you can kindly state your full name slowly for the record, spelling your last name, and then provide us with a summary of your CV.
My name is John Vincenti, Vincenti. I'm licensed in New Jersey as a professional engineer and planner. I graduated in 1983 from Rutgers University, with a BS in civil engineering. I've been licensed both as a planner and an engineer since 1988.
I believe you've testified before this board before.
Yes, I have.
We'll accept his credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, would you then present an overview for the board and also address the comments in the review letter?
Certainly. We're dealing with a 2-acre site located at the 20 Industrial Drive. It's lots 27 and 28 in Block 1051. Property is currently developed. It has a 20,900 square foot building on it. It's a one-story building. It's noted on the board. That's the site plan that we submitted. We're simply proposing to add a 1,550 square foot office addition on the second floor. If you look at the plan, we've cross-hatched on the easterly side or the right side of the building. There's a one-story addition on the side of the building. Our office space will be placed on top of that. So we are not expanding the existing footprint of the building. We are looking to expand within that footprint. The site is really fully developed. There's a series of paved areas and gravel paved areas. Again, we're really making no changes to those areas. Because of us being very close to the floor area ratio limit at 0.24%, the 1,550 square foot addition on the second floor puts us slightly over the 25%. We're at 25.8%, 0.8% above. Really what the owner needs to do because of his business, he has a small office, about 600 square feet on the first floor. He's outgrown that space because of the growth of his business, and he wants to put the 1,550 square foot office space on the second floor. When you think about it, a 1,550 square foot office space is very modest in size. When you're talking about a 21,000 square foot existing building, the total office space is on the order of about, it will be on the order of about 10%. It's traditionally kind of what we see in these types of facilities. What Mr. Foglia does at the facility is he takes large containers, IBCs. He brings them in, he cleans them, he furnishes them. They're either PVC or stainless steel, and then he ships them back out to the owner. So he services these within the building. There's also a need for him, because of the size of these containers and the fact that they're shipped basically in and out on a daily basis, there's a number of trailers that are parked on the site. He has a fenced-in area to the left of the building. Most of the trailers are contained in that secure area, but he does maintain approximately 4 or 5 on a daily basis on the left side, in the front yard, and he needs them on a daily basis to maneuver in and out because he positions the finished clean products in and out through an existing loading door in the front of the building. The main issue that we've identified in the staff reports is the parking situation. If we go and apply your parking requirements and do the calculation based on the various uses existing and proposed, we calculate a requirement by your ordinance of 22 parking spaces. So what we did is we've designated the 22 spaces in 2 areas. I've got 19 spaces designated to the right side or the east side of the building. Now,
There's certainly less than 19 spaces that are striped now, but those are in a paved area, and Mr. Foglia has indicated that he intends on striping those 19 spaces, adding and designating the appropriate handicap parking space in that area. And then there's the question of whether or not we really need the 3 additional parking spaces, which I've shown on the site plan in the front left-hand corner. That's an area of the site that he uses for trailers. So we feel that the extra 3 parking spaces he doesn't need, but in the event the board sees the need for us to place them on the site, we've identified an area in the front of the building, on the right side of the building in the front, next to the area we've designated as the loading area, where we can pave an additional area for the 3 parking spaces. Now, I've had discussions with Mr. Foglia with respect to his current number of employees. Right now, he has 10 to 11 employees in his facility. With the office expansion, he sees that he's going to hire a maximum of 2 other individuals. So that brings us to like 13 employees. From a reasonable standpoint, he needs 13 parking spaces plus an accommodation for the occasional visitor. So I've basically identified a true need of this particular user of 16 parking spaces. So the 19 parking spaces that we've identified on the site in the existing paved areas that will be striped really meet his needs and exceed his needs, whereas we project no more than 16, there are 19. So from that perspective, we feel that if the board sees fit, they can grant that parking variance, and we would provide 19 parking spaces in the paved area versus the 22 that your ordinance technically calls for. With respect to the trailers, we would ask the board to approve and the continuation of the existing use that Mr. Foglia has, utilizing the trailers in the gravel parking area or the gravel area in the front left of the facility, and allow him to continue to use that as he presently does and has done since he has owned and operated the facility at this building. That gives you a brief summary of what we're proposing. I'd like now to go through the memorandum. It's a joint memorandum issued by Veena Sawant, your planner, and Mr. Samal, your assistant engineer. I think I'm just going to start with the Section G zoning requirements. And that first section identifies the non-conforming issues. The first is the floor area ratio that I've identified. That's something that we are creating by the modest addition that we're proposing. And the second notes an existing nonconformity with respect to not meeting the landscape area, minimum landscape area ratio. You're required in this zone to have 40% green space. We exist at slightly under 17% at 16.88%. It's an existing condition, and we're seeking to continue that.
And that existing condition was previously addressed in the last time we were here with the site plan, is that correct? And approved?
We did get an approval on a minor site plan, and I believe that existing landscape area ratio was subsumed in the prior approval. Nothing has really changed since then.
Correct.
The second table in Section G on page 3 deals with the parking requirements, which I've already summarized. We are seeking a loading area stall length. Your requirement is 60-foot loading area. We've designated a 40-foot area. The building is set back 50 feet from the property line. The facility operates within those standards. It's an existing building with an existing loading door in the front. the trailers that are manipulated in that area fit within that area with no problem. So that's an existing condition that we technically seek the waiver of the length of the loading stall. Continuing on, technically, because of the floor area ratio variance, we need a use variance. In this case, the increase in floor area really does not affect the coverage of the property. It doesn't affect the intensity of the use on the property. It simply is a small office addition so that the clerical operations of the existing business can operate more efficiently with this business owner. So I believe that the board can readily approve this variance without detriment to the neighborhood, the surrounding area, or the zone plan. With respect to the landscape area ratio, again, that's an existing condition. I believe it was previously approved, and I think the board can, again, reapprove that existing situation. The third item in the planning and engineering comments deals with parking. I outlined what we feel is the appropriate parking that this owner uses, and we feel that the 19 spaces that we are providing is sufficient for this use, and the board can grant that waiver. There was a question with respect to lighting. There are existing building-mounted lighting on the perimeter of the building. It's not detailed on the plan. As a condition of approval, we will update the plans to provide that information on the existing lights that exist. They illuminate the areas, I believe, sufficiently. They are on a photo cell. My understanding is the photo cell is motion censored, and during the evening hours, the lights are off except for one or two area lights where the building entries are, and then the motion, any motion will turn the lights on for a period of time. This seems to work well for the applicant. He has some of his clientele that bring trailers, trucks to the site in the evening areas. They drop off product in that front area, and then they pick up finished product and take it away at night, so that some of the loading activities take place at night. And it doesn't, from a business plan, Mr. Fogley does not want to move those daily trailers into the secured areas, especially because of the pickup after hours when no one is on the site. So he needs to have those trailers out in the front area.
Just to clarify, it's not really a loading and unloading. They bring a trailer to be of drums or whatever containers to be serviced. They drop off that container.
They drop
and
off
they pick up one that has already been
Right.
serviced, and they remove that. So it's an
Right.
exchange of to be serviced and already serviced, where they drop one trailer, they pick up the other trailer. Is
Right,
that your
it's
understanding?
simply unhooking the trailers and hooking up. There's no actual physical loading and unloading taking place out of the trailers into the building. They basically park a trailer in front and pick up one with the completed products, the clean products.
Almost as you might do with propane tank when you go to the station. You drop off the used one, you pick up a new one.
That's right. And the last bullet point in item number 3 deals with the required ADA signage for the accessible parking space, and we'll provide new signage for that. Item number 4, again, deals with the proposed, the existing loading space that's non-conforming in the front yard, and this technically requires a waiver. Again, we believe that the board can grant this waiver. It's an existing condition, and it's how this building operated before Mr. Foglia purchased it and how it currently operates. Item number 5, again, is again, the issue with where the trailer parking takes place. And I think Mr. Fogler is going to really address how that operation takes place on a daily basis and why he needs that to run his business. Item number 6, I dealt with the lighting. Item number 7, no new signage is being proposed. Item number 8, traffic. There are no changes to the existing traffic patterns. Item number 9, there's a utility pole with a guy wire. We're going to properly protect that guy wire because it's in close proximity to the parking stalls. And that basically is summary of how we intend to address the comments that staff has raised. That's all I have.
Note, the board doesn't have, what was the prior approval, 09?
It was a planning board approval.
Okay, then that's why we don't have one.
That was approved in 2016.
Okay, so we don't know whether that was, the item you were talking about with the parking, we don't know whether that was part of it or not, but maybe the professionals will know from having.
Actually, what I was adjusting was the landscape ratio. I think that
I'm
was
sorry, the
addressed.
landscape ratio, okay.
And you're right, it was the planning board.
Yes.
You were testifying for both, so we'll go to both. Ms. Shapiro?
Mr. Chairman, I think the confusion with the parking is when Mr. Samal and Vina had first looked at it, they had looked at an existing plan that showed existing parking spaces striped out there. When they did visit the site, they noticed that the parking striping, as it's shown as existing on the plan, is not striped out there. So although there's been testimony tonight about the 22 spaces that they're showing on here, and now they're down to 19 because they're taking away the 3, it's not striped out there as of today. 11 are striped out there. So then, so what I'm hearing is they're going to ask for leniency on providing the 22 and provide 19 instead. The parking within the front yard leads up right at the edge of this 5-foot road widening easement. And in looking at this tonight, I missed this in my earlier review, but I'm thinking as part of the previous application, was the 5 feet ever recorded, or was the deed ever revised to give that dedication to the township? I don't recall. I don't remember. I know that as part of the iteration, when we have a right-of-way dedication along a roadway in town, we do make sure that goes before council so that they could adopt that and we could have some sort of like mechanism to record it. But I don't remember that ever happening. So I would ask if the board looks favorably on this application that we make sure that happens. In addition, I would like to check if it is 5 feet, because what we do when we ask applicants to come in with their right-of-way dedication is we look at the master plan circulation element, and we look at how we classify each roadway and what we want our future right-of-way to be. So from that, then we determine the half width of the roadway, and then the right-of-way requirement, and then we ask for that right-of-way dedication. So blindly tonight, then I would be asking the applicant to agree to that, not knowing if that 5 feet could be more. So those were my only 2 comments. The ADA space is 1, and it has to be van accessible, and I heard that, and from what I understand, I believe Mr. Vincente had agreed to that.
That's
Yes.
fine, yes. Anything else, Ms. Shapiro?
I just want to add one thing to what Nicole said. Actually, I did get an opportunity to go back and look at the previous application that was submitted. I went through the paperwork. I did not find any deed. Yes. So, and I remember that the survey was exactly the same. It showed all the 19 delineated spaces. However, when we went to the site, there were only 11 spaces marked up there. There were trailers parked in the front yard, but one thing I wanted to reiterate is I actually went and looked at the previous resolution only because I wanted to check if the trailer parking was part of the prior approval. And in researching on that, I went through the whole file, but trailer parking, and I had this conversation with the zoning officer as well, the ordinance is not very clear on how trailer parking is treated, but to take the most conservative approach, we take them as outdoor storage. So when it's outdoor storage, typically I would say that it's allowed in the side yards and the rear yards. There is some sort of screening, landscape screening or a fence to screen it. In this case, the front yard trailer parking is what bothers me. This area, and that's something I need clarification on. Did you say you would pave that area or no?
No.
No, we'd like to just keep it as unpaved.
Okay, so that's the other thing is the ordinance requires that any parking or loading areas be paved. Now, with the right-of-way dedication, I don't think the loading space would be 60 feet. You could accommodate only 40 feet. I would insist that at least that loading space be paved, especially hearing the engineer's testimony and the ingress and egress activity that will be conducted by these trailers. I would consider it to be safe to have it paved. In fact, I would defer to Nicole on that.
I would agree.
Yep. That's it for now.
Go ahead, Mr. McGowan.
The owner is with us tonight, and he would like to address that specifically, and then we can decide what.
One question. There's 22 spots. There's supposed to be 22, but there's 19, but only 11 are delineated.
Right.
Are these going to be marked?
Yes.
The 19 will be marked. There are 3 that are on the gravel area that exist, that if you want to have 22, we would agree that there could be 22, as long as we get a waiver from having to pave those parking spaces and also line those parking spaces. So there's room for 22 cars. We only need 16. We have paved, and we'll line 19.
Let's see what they say.
Sure.
I think based on the intensity of the use, I would be comfortable saying that ask for a parking variance and show 19 spaces, but I do recollect that as part of the original approval too, these 3 parking spaces were shown on the site plan. And I don't believe they were ever delineated. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I just skimmed through it. You designed the site, so you might know it better.
The 3 parking spaces were added for this particular site plan, not the prior site plan that was approved by the planning.
So when you went in front of the planning board, because I don't have the file now, when you went in front of the planning board, were you granted a parking variance at that time? Probably not, because you didn't have the office space and you would have met the township's parking ordinance requirement at that time.
Right, it was a minor site plan for a 320 square foot addition on the right side of the building. So when you do a minor site plan, the checklist of required items is much less than the full site plan. So the parking requirements are not on the checklist. So the parking criteria was really not indicated on the minor site plan.
I mean, I would disagree on that, because whether it's a minor site plan or a major site plan, when I review it, that's the first thing I would look at if the proposed or the existing use really meets the parking requirement. But now thinking about it, probably without the second floor addition, you would have either ways met the parking requirement at that time. And that is why there was no emphasis on the parking, or there was no mention of the parking. But now with the office space being added on the second floor, I think it's quite essential to include it in the parking requirement and seek a parking variance.
Okay, and we're going to hear why they don't want to pave the area you're talking about, right?
Yes.
You would prefer where the trailers are parked to be paved? just so the board understands.
Yes.
Next, hold on. Board members to my left of this witness, and he testified as a planning engineer and planner. None? On my right? Mr. Weiner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, actually, one brief comment. If it satisfied our engineer and planner as well as the board, should the board ultimately consider this application favorable, it might be a suggestion to have as a condition affirmatively in any resolution that any prior conditions from the planning board approval that may have not been satisfied or in the opinion of the staff were not fully satisfied are a condition of this approval.
Absolutely, you know, if that
So
was.
this way it just kind of reiterates it and no one has to go back and
Absolutely.
I
if
think
it
it's a good
wasn't
idea.
done then, it'll
Yes.
be done now.
You would agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, no one has any questions. Next witness.
Okay. Mr. Foglia, Anthony Foglia, he is the owner. May be sworn in, please.
Mr. Weiner?
Yes, sir. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give tonight will be the truth?
Yes.
And if you can kindly state your full name slowly for the record, spelling your last name, and I guess tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Anthony E. Foglia, last name Foglia. I own the business located at this property.
The principal?
Yes, I'm the principal owner, 20 Industrial Drive. And I operate the business on a day-to-day basis at that site. So,
Yeah, you heard some of the discussion and testimony regarding the parking. Would you explain to the board what the use and purpose of the trucks that park in front of the building are, and also the trucks that are on the side? One of the concerns generally is whether the trailers are being used as storage or whether in fact they are in and out trailers. And, you know, what's the distinction between the ones in front, ones on side? And also, after you explain that, talk about what would, your concerns about whether that area is paved or not paved.
okay. The trailers outside the fence in front of the property that are on the side, those trailers are essential to the day-to-day operation. Those trailers move in and out on a daily basis. A lot of the products that are in those trailers go into the building. There's a loading dock door up front on that side of the building. So the loading and unloading is done inside the building. Those trailers are backed basically all the way into the building, and the loading and unloading is done inside the building. Then we have customers that come after hours sometimes and pick up the finished products in those trailers, and to not have drivers accessing my yard when nobody's on the site after hours, we use those spaces to park the trailer with the finished product that they're picking up to take out, and leave an empty space for them to bring and drop the trailer that they're bringing. So those 4 or 5 parking spaces for those trailers are critically essential to the day-to-day operation. And the trailers that are inside the fence or inside the gate on the side yard, those trailers are more trailers that may be there for a few days, might be there for a week or so, before we process and transfer the containers, empty and then reload before those trailers go out. So that's like a staging area up front outside the fence where those trailers are going in and out on a daily basis.
You have a variety of clients and a fair number of customers, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And some of the customers deliver to you containers on a daily basis and remove containers on a daily basis. Is that correct?
Correct.
You have others who will deliver to you perhaps on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, so that when they have containers that need to be cleaned, they will bring them to you, they'll leave them with you, and maybe in 2 weeks, they have new ones, they'll come in, drop off the new ones to be cleaned, take the other ones that they delivered and remove them. Is that how that works?
Correct.
Okay. Would you address the issue of why you feel that having the front area stoned is, going to work for you better than if you had to pave it?
Well, it operates perfectly sufficient. The area in the center of the building up front where the loading dock door is, that's a 16-foot wide door, 14-foot high, that we back the trailers in and out of on a daily basis. I don't understand, I don't see any need whatsoever to have that area paved. And on the side where we temporarily stage and park the trailers to go in and out, again, the gravel stone area is perfectly sufficient. It's not, I just don't understand why that area would have any reason whatsoever to be paved. It's not a retail type business where people are coming, in and out. It's, a truck, dropping a trailer and picking up another one. So I just,
It's a cost and a maintenance item that you'd prefer to avoid if possible?
yeah, it's a major cost that is just not necessary for any reason that I could think of. So.
Okay. If the board or the professionals have additional questions?
Okay, we'll see if they feel differently. Ms. Shapiro?
I'm just going to go first. I think the main issue is that we need a site plan that shows the existing conditions as they are today. Because without going out there, we wouldn't have ever seen those containers parked there to the left of the building. Even the parking spaces, it's like, well, there were 19 shown on the previous, and now there's 11 out there. So we need an updated site plan showing the existing conditions. Vina and I were talking, hearing Mr. Foglia's explanation of how they go inside and they're really doing the loading in the building, okay, we can get on board with not paving the front, but then a variance would be required for not providing the loading space in the front. It would be required because you don't have the length. So if you don't have the length, you don't have the space, you don't have the space, you have a variance. So I think we would want the site plan then to show the container parking on the side, but be cognizant of the fact that you cannot park the container within the right-of-way of the roadway, and now the right-of-way will encroach a little bit more into your parking lot. So I think you lose that one container space closest to the edge of pavement.
Thank you.
And I believe you will also need a variance on the trailer parking because it's outdoor storage. So I would recommend just ask it as a variance for the loading stall not shown on the site plan, the trailer parking in the front yard, and the parking variance along with the D4, which you're already requesting.
Let me ask a silly question. They're here for preliminary, final, and major site plan, and we don't have a site plan. Right?
No, we do.
Do we do?
Yeah.
What, this?
Survey.
You mean for the upstairs for the building?
Do you have the site
Do
plan?
I have one?
You do have the site plan.
I don't think I
That's
do.
this document here. The exhibit.
Survey.
Exhibit on the screen. And you have the architectural plans.
The problem with the site plan is it's not showing the existing conditions, and in fact, the existing parking spaces, which they're calling the proposed parking spaces in testimony, are shown here as existing spaces on the site plan that they're calling the site plan. So I would say that should the board look favorably on approving this application, that the plan entitled Second Floor Building Addition for Foglia Industry Properties LLC, dated June 20th, last revised September 19, 2019, page 1 of 1, be revised to reflect correctly the existing conditions on site and the proposed improvements as we've discussed them tonight.
That agreed?
Absolutely agree, sure.
Anything else?
That's it.
Board members on my left of the principal? On my right? Mr. Wynn?
Nothing.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any other witnesses, Mr. McGowan?
That's it, thank you very much.
Mr. Watt?
I just have one question. I'm not sure if I heard the justifications for the requested variances. So can we have some planning testimony to justify the requested variances, please?
All right.
Well, I'm still left up in the air about the paving, because he said he doesn't really want to do it because it's money, and you said it might be okay not to do it?
That's what I'm saying,
Okay,
because
well-
based on the testimony from Mr. Foglia, he's loading inside the building.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, operational-wise, you know, if the people that are picking up his equipment are okay being on gravel, we're okay with it, and because he's then getting the variance for the loading, we're okay with it.
Go ahead, Mr.
If I,
Question for Ms. Shapiro. Just want to make sure the issues with the site plan, are we comfortable with a subject to? Or do you feel that there are things that you're okay with having after the fact, or?
I'm
is it
okay.
problematic now?
It's not problematic. I mean, when we were reviewing it, it was quite confusing when we got out there and we saw something that's on the plan that's marked as existing, but in actuality didn't exist. So now that we've clarified that tonight, I expect that there would be a revision to this plan showing truly what's existing and truly what's proposed.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
let me recall John Vincenti for a moment, just to address
Under
FEMA's
oath.
issues.
So I think I did discuss the floor area ratio variance. So the additional variances and waivers deal with the trailer parking in the front yard, the size of the loading space of being 40 feet versus 60. And then the actual parking of the trailers in the front yard, which is being considered as storage as opposed to vehicle parking. Are those the three?
Just give me 1 second. I'm going to put this together because I don't want to mix up the variances with the waivers. So, first let's go with the variances. The first one is the use variance D4. You need a variance from attachment G, schedule of required loading spaces for not having a loading space. You need a variance from,
We do have a loading space, though.
no, but that's what we discussed, right? We won't show the loading space in the front yard because the loading activity is done inside the building and not pave the front yard. That's a waiver. Then we need a variance from section 250-43K2 for the trailer parking. And you need a variance from the parking requirement, which is attachment F, schedule of required parking. So those are your variances. Now your waivers, you need a waiver from section 250-77 related to the loading spaces, which is, give me 1 second, I'll give you the exact section. 77 B1A, that's the loading space size, and that's a waiver. You need a waiver from section 77A2 for having parking close to the setback.
Is that true if we only have 19 spaces? It's only
Yes.
if, yeah, it is.
You still have the trailer parking in the front
Oh, the
yard.
trailer parking, I'm
Yes.
thinking, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thinking of cars.
You need a waiver from section 77A2D for not paving the front yard. There is an existing variance on the LA or the landscape area ratio too. I think we covered everything now. Sure.
I'm a little confused with the loading space waiver. I don't understand why we would need a waiver for the loading space if all the loading and unloading is done inside the building.
But your front yard is still being treated as a loading area, right?
Area.
You're not delineating the space, but the front yard is still used for loading, and that is after the right-of-way dedication, it's less than 60 feet. So I would recommend you ask for a waiver.
Access area from the street to inside the building, because that's less than 60 feet, that's considered loading space, even though it's just a truck moving, you know, either into my building or out of the building, that's considered loading space? That's
The
what I'm
whole
confused.
area is loading. It's a technical waiver, and we are okay granting it, but I think you should just ask for the waiver because that front yard is less. And, you know, I don't know if Mr. McGowan has anything
No,
contrary to say, but.
we're satisfied to be safe rather than sorry, so that's fine. John?
And the van accessible parking space?
That's going to be
That we're
provided.
gonna mark.
We're gonna mark that?
Yes. We'll put in proper signage and marking.
That's it then, right?
Yes.
Everybody catch up on that, board? Okay. You have no further witnesses, and you're done now, Mr. Vicente?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the public on the matter, okay?
Please.
28-19Z, this is Fogley Industrial Properties located on Industrial Drive. Anyone here in the courtroom this evening want to be heard on this matter? Please raise your hand or stand and come forward. No one has, we'll close the public portion. Board, we can move forward on the D4 floor area ratio. Should that not prevail, there'd be no need to take any other votes, correct?
True. That's correct.
We'll get that out of the way. This is for D4 floor area ratio. I think it's going from, what, .24 to .28?
5-8.
258.
Yeah,
So it's kind of de minimis, right?
Yes.
All right.
less than one.
Someone want to move this? I will. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Conner?
Yes.
Ms. Stilbo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. All right, now we need, the bulk variances are what? The trailer parking, correct? And the parking, the amount of parking. They're going to have 19 where 22 is required. Correct? Yes. All right, board, you have that?
Yes.
Someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Conner?
Yes.
Ms. Stilbo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. And then the waivers, the loading area, correct?
Yes.
The parking too close to the setback?
Yes.
And the
Gravel.
lack of pavement in the front yard?
Yes.
Three, correct? Okay. Everybody understand?
And the landscaping, which was pre-existing,
Which is
but still
pre-existing,
should be
non-conforming,
reaffirmed.
right? We have all that, someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Conner?
Yes.
Ms. Stilbo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
And of course, there'll be an agreement with whatever was on the previous, you'll
Yes,
work all that out.
we will fulfill whatever obligations existed from the planning board approval.
Thank you
if they
for
have
putting
not
that
been
on
fulfilled.
record. My vote is yes. Thank you for your
Thank you very
presentation
much.
and
Thank you.
your witnesses.
Site plan.
I'm sorry, oh, that's right, site plan. And my mistake, I got it.
Preliminary and final.
Much paper up there. So it's not missing after all. So I apologize. Preliminary and final. Someone want to move it?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. O'Connor, seconds, roll call.
Yes.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you, members of the board, and thank you, Mr. Sachs.
Happy Thanksgiving to all.
Thank you. Well, we're not leaving. He's leaving. We're not.
Well, some of them. are. Free to go?
You're free to go.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to, the next one up is going to be in Metro.
Okay.
And we're going to go on a recess because the stenographers have to change over. Okay? We stand in recess. 5 minutes. All right, I'll call the meeting back to order. Ms. Silverman,
color, the site rendering.
Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
Here. Okay.
Mr. Watt? Here. Mr. Hart? Here. Mr. Darcy?
Present.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Okay, next application, 15-19Z, Metro Storage LLC, in the OG1 zone. This is at Route 9 and Cindy Street for a 3-story self-storage facility. Preliminary and final major site plan with C&D variances. Why Scala? Mr.
Scala, Chairman.
Scala is representing the applicant, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't get it right for the second.
That's all right, no problem. Good evening, everyone. John Scala on behalf of Metro Storage LLC. It is our pleasure to be back before the board this evening. This is the second public hearing with respect to this application. We do have the plan up on the screen right now. That was an exhibit marked last month as Exhibit A2. When we were here back on October 3rd, you did hear detailed engineering testimony from project engineer Brad Bowler. You also heard detailed operations testimony and architectural testimony from Bob Heilman of Metro. We had, since we had an intervening time, we did have review reports on the initial submittal from the board professionals as well as Mr. Hart. We did take the opportunity to make a revised site plan submittal, really to address the comments. There were no major changes relative to the site plan itself, but there were a number of technical comments, stormwater management and other things that were addressed with respect to that revised submittal. We did receive revised review reports. I can say relative to your engineer's review, Mr. Darcy's review letter of October 31st, it appears most of the items that were open have been addressed satisfactorily, and anything that remains within that report, I can just represent to the board. We're in full agreement to comply. Some of them are things such as recording a stormwater management or operations and management manual and Title 39 and things of that nature. I would say the same for Mr. Hart's report, our fire report. I think we addressed most of the items to his satisfaction. There were a couple comments in that report as well, changing a hydrant location, I believe, and we're agreeable to that. And Ms. Watt's report, I'm not sure there were so many comments in there, but whatever is remaining we'll address accordingly. One housekeeping item that I would say, because there was a question raised by Mr. Sachs, and that pertained to the development itself and what we were doing with the northern portion of the site. Question was asked that if this project were to receive a favorable approval, would the applicant be agreeable to a condition that precludes any development on the remainder, I'll call it the northern parcel, and the applicant is certainly amenable to that type of condition. We didn't really run the numbers on it, but of this 9.5 acre or 9.7 acre site, it's probably something between 6 and 7 acres that would remain in perpetuity as open space and undeveloped space. So That was one of the questions that was raised. In terms of this evening, when we last left off, we didn't have time to reach our traffic engineer, John Harder, but he's here tonight. We're going to start out with Mr. Harder. And then our final witness on the application is our professional planner, Nick Graviano, and we'll see how far we make it tonight, Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Harder, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
John Harder, Harter, professional engineer. I'm a traffic engineer.
And Mr. Harder, can you please provide the board with a brief overview of your educational and professional background and licenses you hold?
Yes, Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University in 1993. I've been at Atlantic since that time, where I'm principal now, just over 25 years I've been there, and my focus has been on traffic engineering, traffic studies, DOT access permits, intersection
Licensed in the
design.
state of New Jersey, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you.
Mr. Harder, you've undertaken studies with respect to this proposed project. You're involved with permitting and so forth with respect to access and the like. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Why don't you please provide the board with an overview of your findings with respect to traffic associated with this project?
Sure. They're really, as Mr. Wicascala just explained, there are two different aspects of our role, which is the first is NJDOT and access permitting, because it's really driven by traffic or trip generation. And then the second component was a traffic statement, a report that we prepared and submitted to the board. Relative to NJDOT, it is obviously along Route 9 northbound, and we are just south of a jug handle. We reached out to DOT. This is a very low generator in terms of trips, so this type of land use based on the trip generation requires just a minor permit, which is the lowest of the 3 commercial permits that are issued by DOT. Due to the jug handle location and our site, we wanted to locate the driveway as far south as possible, which required a waiver from DOT to grant what they call an edge clearance. So the driveway is located with 0 edge clearance, which means the radius begins right at the southern end of the property. And that's, we think, a benefit, and DOT agreed. We met with them in October of 2018 to make sure that they would accept that waiver. And subsequently, we submitted the DOT, and we just recently, on October 21, received, or the property owner received, a permit to be signed and returned to the department. So they've granted approval. I did catch an error on the cover sheet of the permit, which just missed the total square footage. It overlooked the second building that's at the rear of the property, and they're correcting that on the permit, and we should have the executed permit next week. We can supply it to the township. So in terms of DOT, I think that's very favorable. The lot is also, just to point out, a conforming lot in terms of DOT, so that means it's sized such that DOT does not limit the amount of trips to a property. Smaller lots that are non-conforming would have certain restrictions in size, would affect ultimately the size of a development you could put on a property. In terms of the traffic report, we prepared what we call a traffic statement. So given the low volume nature of this type of land use, we didn't go out and do traffic counts and levels of service as you would for a use that would generate, say, a significant increase in traffic. So self-storage facility of this size, as proposed, would generate approximately 40 maximum peak hour trips based on ITE trip generation calculations. ITE and NJDOT measure a significant increase as 100 or more trips, so we're well below that. So roughly on a Saturday, we're talking about 24 trips, vehicles going into the site, and 17 exiting is what the trip generation calculations indicate. So it's a very light generator, and I would say just for this location or this site and where it's located on Route 9, adjacent to the jug handle, I think it's really an optimal development for the property because it's even even though it's a commercial corridor, it's a very low trip generator, and it's also a use that will generate repeat users. People are storing their goods, and they live in the market area. So you have familiarity with the site and low trip generation. We also, through our preparation for the hearing, we did look at other permitted uses in the OG1 zone because we're a non-permitted use. And this also goes to show that the low-intensity nature of our proposed self-storage facility. So we found that drinking place, walk-in bank, and medical dental office, those are all feasible or permitted uses for this location. And the trip generation, just looking at the weekday evening peak hour, shows that those uses would be quite a bit higher in terms of trip generation. The self-storage facility, based on IT, is projected to be 23 trips during that peak hour in the evening, whereas the drinking place would result in 45 trips. We had assumed an average building size based on ITE data, which was a 4,000 square foot drinking place. So 45 trips, that's almost double. A walk-in bank of 2,000 square feet would generate 53 trips, again, double. And then a medical dental office of approximately 28,000 square feet, an average research size from ITE would generate 97 trips, so approximately 4 times as much. So I think that provides a good, or backs up what I described in terms of low trip generation nature of the proposed use. The other aspect, traffic related for the property and the project is parking. The township requirements indicate 26 spaces would be required, and we have provided 13. In our report, we talked about ITE research for self-storage facilities, and based on data that they've compiled, the average demand rate, so it's an average of all the research sites they've looked at, it's an average of various peaks of parking demand. And but using that rate, we came up with 13 vehicles as a maximum would be parked on the site. As you heard at the original hearing, Bob Heilman from Metro Storage explained that he's really found that IT is overestimates from what Metro Storage experiences at their sites, and a much lower volume of parking. But I think we should clarify just about this type of land use and this proposal. It's unique. It's parking and loading, or loading and unloading is really what occurs on these types of sites. In the layout, we have 13 designated parking spaces, and those are intended, they're up front by the office, they're intended for people when they come in, maybe they sign up initially for a unit, but going forward, they can use the spaces for unloading their belongings or loading them back in their vehicle, whatever. But the site is also designed with oversized aisles, 30-foot wide aisles around the building, so that those areas can also function for loading and are intended to, so that the patrons are proximate to their units if they're in the back of the building or in the 6,600 square foot building at the rear of the property. So there's numerous opportunities to park in those areas and unload their belongings. So in reality, we have much more parking, and I would say we'd really exceed what the requirement is if you consider all the available 30-foot wide aisle and the areas around the building. We also have the 2 loading spaces within for the truck loading at the front of the property. So you have, technically, I guess you could look at, you have 13 spaces designated, 2 formal loading spaces, and then numerous opportunities around the building where loading can occur and vehicles can easily continue to maneuver around the property.
Kim, maybe, I'm sorry, can you just put up Exhibit A3? That was actually the blow-up. I know I see people straining to see the site. It actually just blows in closer. I think it was Exhibit A3. That's what I had written my notes down. Yeah, I think that's the one.
Thank you. Yeah, it's still pretty small, but the 13 spaces are toward the front of the property, near the office, and then you have the 2 formal loading spaces. But as I was just testifying, around the entire building, we have a 30-foot aisle. You know, really a 22-foot aisle is sufficient for two-way maneuvers or traffic flow on a site. So we're 8 feet beyond that, which is plenty, such that a vehicle could stop and do their unloading, and then two-way circulation can still continue. So, I mean, that's the intent of the layout. So I think a strict look at the parking supply, you have to look beyond that, given how the site functions. And John, I think that covers all the direct that I was planning to provide.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Georgie?
I don't have anything, Mr. Hart.
Ms. Sawant?
Anything.
Board members, to my left. On my right? Mr. Sachs, anything? Go ahead, Mr. Oh, okay. Didn't look like Mr. Drum. Mr. Prescott?
That's close, Praska. Just a couple questions, and I think it's just additional testimony from Ms. Drum's letter regarding the DOT. Did they have any issues or comments regarding access and the pork chop island being mountable? It looks like from your truck circulation elements that the trucks will need to mount that median. Was there any concern from their end on that?
No, it is intended to be a mountable island, so for that purpose.
And then just briefly going on back to parking, the ITE manual that was used, the national data, does look at sites throughout the nation, and the data does point to 13 spaces at a minimum. The concern that we had was the sites that were surveyed, most of them are under the square footage that this site has. And the variance in the data suggests that that number might be higher than the 13 spaces. So in light of, or in lieu of looking at local data, we would suggest potentially adding 2 or 3 additional spaces. And I think from the last meeting, there was talk about a gate potentially being at the site. Has that been determined?
There is going to be a security gate. It hasn't been shown on the plans yet, but there will be control in and out of the facility.
Okay. And will that gate preclude the ability to potentially park on that 30-foot drive aisle for visitors in the front?
The answer is no.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. Counselor?
Great. That's it. Call Mr. Graviano.
Mr. Chairman, may I introduce myself? My name is
Sir?
Ron.
Go ahead.
Ganzarowski. I'm an attorney in the office of Jersey. I have in fact been retained by a group of residents who are immediately adjacent to the site, and I do intend at a later time to call. I'm sorry. Let me start again. My name is Ron.
Move it away.
Sure. My name is Ron Ganzarowski. I'm an attorney with offices in Red Bank, New Jersey. I have in fact been retained by a group of residents who live immediately to the rear of the subject site. I do intend at a later point to introduce direct testimony in opposition to this application. I have just been retained recently. I have retained the services of a professional planner, Mr. Peter Steck, who is not available this evening because of the time constraints. I do have some questions.
Let me defer to Mr. Sachs for advice.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Gazarovski. And Mr. Chairman, I did speak to Mr. Gazarovski today, and I think on another occasion. And I understand he wants to put an objector's case on with direct testimony, and I'm sure cross-examination of the applicant's witnesses. So, Mr. Gazarovski, I'm going to let the applicant put their case in chief in now. Obviously, I think at the last hearing, they provided the testimony of their engineer, and I think operations this evening. And architect, and then this evening, we're going to hear traffic and planning. I don't know if you're prepared to cross-examine this evening. If you are, that's fine, but if not, I think what I would advise the board is that we permit an opportunity for the objector's case to go forward, and that may have to be at our next meeting. And certainly the applicant would have to have his witnesses available as well.
And if I had my druthers, I would prefer not to
Okay.
cross-examine this evening because of the time, and I appreciate your courtesies as well as the indulgence of the board, as well as my colleague, Mr. Wichiscala. I'm here prepared to listen, and I will be prepared to proceed forward to the next meeting.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Chairman, just one moment.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Chairman, we're going to ask the matter just be adjourned right now. I'm not going to put on our planner. We'll bring our planner back next time, and at that time, Mr. Gazarovski can cross-examine and put on his own proofs.
Yeah, that's...
Acceptable.
And actually, before we do that, though, I think we still need to go to the public.
You can still
which
go to the
we're
public. I'm sorry.
All right, but you're
I think,
not...
Mr. Harder will be our last witness this evening.
Okay.
All right, there's not going to be any further testimony this evening on this particular matter, but I will open a public portion. This is Metro Storage, 15-19Z at Route 9 and Cindy Street. Does anybody who wants to be heard this evening, please raise your hand. Come forward, sir. Will there be others? By a show of hands, is there anyone else here that's going to...
Ron, excuse me, I don't need...
Okay, sir, if you're going to put anything on the record, you got to come forward and be sworn.
Sir, please raise your... Thank you. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your name, spelling your last name, and address for the record.
Kevin Ahern, Ahearn, 15 Fernwood Place. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting.
That microphone away because we're
Away.
getting all feedback
Okay.
up here. You
Yeah,
don't
I-
have to hold it close.
Okay. I just have one question.
Is this, Chairman, I believe Mr. Ahern is represented by Mr. Gazarovski.
I am.
I would represent to the board that I do represent Mr. Ahern and his group. I was about to rise. It's my understanding that since Mr. Ahern is represented by counsel, he cannot ask questions, but at the conclusion of this hearing, he as well as his neighbors can make comment. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Ahern, if you want to make some comment, I don't think there's any objection from the board. So,
Your address, sir? Comment.
I can comment.
Your address.
15 Fernwood Place.
15 Fernwood, thank you.
And my comment is that I received from the DEP under open records, no refiling of a wetlands permit. I just make that statement.
You received something, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
in other words, you filed an OPA request with the DEP, and they provided you with records?
Saying there was no refiling.
Well, I'm assuming you're going to provide those to your counsel.
Yes.
And I'm sure he's going to utilize that for purposes of his objector's case. Correct, Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, sir. Who's the other person that raised their hand?
Yeah, I'll defer until next meeting.
The same situation? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else? We'll close the public portion.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, just so we understand the game plan for the next meeting, and Kim, that would be December 3rd? Or December 5th, I think, right? I don't know. One of those dates. December 5th.
Third.
Oh, so that's December 3rd, all right. So at that point, from what I understand now, the applicant will provide,
December 3rd is a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
then it's the 5th. I was right, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2020.
Oh,
Okay, we're a little ahead.
all right, so December 5th. All right, so the applicant will bring back all of its witnesses, and you'll present your planning testimony through Mr. Graviano, correct?
Correct.
And then, Mr. Gazarovski, you'll have your witnesses here. That's correct. Who you've indicated will be a planner? Yes. Mr. Steck? Yes. Okay. All right, and certainly, I believe the transcript from the last hearing is probably available.
It is, and
It was
we'll-
provided.
we'll have this transcript
And you'll
available
have
as
this, Mr. Gazarovski, you'll have the benefit of all the transcripts prior to that hearing, so.
All right, this matter will be continued to December 5th. There'll be no further notice, so if you're interested in this matter, it will be on the agenda December 5th. That's next month, this year, 2019.
Do we have anything else that evening, Kim?
We had a full calendar last time, and we had a full calendar tonight.
All right, if we have, if we have a small application, we want to obviously get rid of. Yeah, I think we'll try to get this heard earlier than we did last time, and certainly not a problem.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Shorter night.
See you after Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to all.
I would thank you for the courtesy you extended to me.
Not a problem, sir.
Always a pleasure.
For those watching at home, we did not go into recess, but we did have a change of stenographers, and momentarily we're going to start the final application for this evening. Everybody's back on the
Just a
dais.
pitching change.
We are back on TV, board members. Silverman? Okay. I didn't even call the application, but go ahead, give me the roll call, that's a good idea.
Present.
Here.
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 Good. For those watching at home, the TV will be going off at 10, so I guess that leaves about 20 minutes left for your entertainment this evening. Final application is 20-19Z. It's Two Girls Waterworks Road LLC. This is in the SD3 zone, located on Old Waterworks Road. It's for expanding building height requirement. Amended preliminary and final major site plan with D variance. Robert McGowan's representing the applicant. Mr. McGowan.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, professionals. I am here representing Two Girls. Two Girls was here before in last 2018, in which we presented essentially the same concept and largely a similar plan to what we're going to be reviewing with you tonight. The reason that we have come back in such short order is that while the owner and the applicant has always believed that this was an appropriate use and a use which was viable and needed in the area, it is a first-time venture for them. So that has been a learning process both in their initial application and since the initial application as to what they needed and where they needed and how they could best operate the intended use of the site. With that education and realization, they are now returning for a few adjustments to the site. With me tonight is John Vincenti, who has testified earlier this evening, professional engineer and professional planner. He will be testifying to the engineering aspects of the application. Also with me is Dave Roberts, a professional planner, who has also testified before this board tonight, not tonight, previously, but not tonight. And then a representative of the company is with us as well. With that, with the board's permission, I will have John sworn in and begin his testimony.
Mr. Sachs.
Mr. Vincenti, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
John Vincenti, V-I-N-C-E-N-T-I. I'm testifying as a professional engineer on this application. I'm affiliated with FWH Associates. I am a part-time employee of that firm.
Mr. Vincenti is familiar to the board, seeing as he was on a prior application just a short time ago, and we recognize his credentials and accept them.
Thank you.
So the first thing we'd like to do is introduce several exhibits that we're going to use this evening. The first is an aerial exhibit that I believe was marked as A2. The site has been designated in red. Cheesequake Road is to the right of the site. Old Waterworks Road is along the southerly border. You have Bordentown Road in Sayreville and beyond. And the site is fully developed. It's right now used as a contractor's yard. There are several contractors that occupy the entire property. The property is essentially totally impervious. There are some existing structures primarily at the corner of the intersection of the two roadways. In our prior application, we were rehabilitating one of those buildings, putting a second floor on it. That's going to change, and I'm going to get into that. The second exhibit, which was marked as A1, is a colored rendering of the landscape plan. The landscape plan is part of the set. And again, that's a blow-up of the site. We have Old Waterworks Road across the bottom, Cheesequake Road to the right. We have a parking area at the southeasterly corner, a new building at the northeasterly corner, truck parking along the front, our material bins, our concrete plant and buildings associated with that, and all the way to the west we have a stormwater management underground facility. The two other exhibits, 3 and 4, are colored renderings of the architectural elevations of the two main structures. That is A4, I believe, and that is the batch building, which is in the center of the site. And then A3 is the what we're calling a 9,800 square foot garage facility. And what we tried to do is enhance the architectural elements of those buildings to add a little character. But what I want to do is primarily focus on the landscape plan, if we could put that up. And I just want to walk the board through generally what we're proposing and the changes from what the board approved last year. We're dealing with a 5.55 acre parcel located at the corner of Cheesequake Road and Old Waterworks Road. It's in the SD3 zone. Presently, as I indicated, it's a contractor's yard. There are several users of that. All of those existing, some of them are tenants. All of those users will vacate the property as this site gets redeveloped for the concrete plant. We previously submitted an application to the board. The board approved a use variance for the concrete batch facility. Also approved a site plan to permit a concrete plan with a conversion of an existing building at the corner of the property for a 2-story maintenance facility with office building on the top. This is an amended site plan and amended use variance to still permit the concrete plant. Changes include the construction of buildings primarily to enclose the batch plant and the equipment to allow full season maintenance, and also a new 9,800 square foot 1-story vehicle maintenance facility at the northerly corner of the property, which is larger than what was previously proposed. We revised the parking area to kind of isolate that in the front corner. The material storage area is essentially the same. We're changing the detention facility, which is still located on the west portion of the site. Previously, that was an above-ground facility. We're proposing to put that underground in a concrete underground vault. And on top of that, we're proposing a concrete pad for material handling of the materials as they come back from the site.
That change in operation at that part of the site is triggering a change in the coverage on the property and an impact on the landscape area ratio. We're seeking to continue the use and bulk variances that were previously approved. We're introducing a new height variance associated with the batch plant building. That building is in the center of the site. We're proposing a 55-foot tall building versus what your ordinance maximum is 45 feet. So that's a new use variance. For the height, we're going to have a planner who's going to discuss all of those variances and give the justifications. As I indicated, also there's an amended landscape area variance and associated bulk variances and design waivers. At the front of the site, we relocated the vehicle maintenance facility back to the north. It's now 9,800 square feet. It's a one-story building where previously we had proposed office on the top. There are 7 bay doors. We're seeking a front yard setback variance to Cheesequake Road. We're proposing a 15-foot front setback from the new right-of-way line, where your ordinance requires 75 feet. The board may recall that when the existing building was located at the front corner of the property, the setback was actually less than the 15 feet, and the board approved that. So we're, again, seeking front yard setback variance, but the impact is slightly less, where it's a 15-foot setback. In this area, we're also proposing a 30-vehicle parking lot that's associated with mainly employees. To access that parking lot, you would enter the easternmost driveway, make a right, and this is all dead-end parking. And what we tried to do is segregate that employee parking area from the main operation of the plant, and that kind of fit in well in the front corner. We were able to provide some extensive buffering in that area as well. The center of the site is where we have our material storage bins, more or less where they were previously, and then our batch plant is located to the left of that. There are 2 structures that we're proposing to enclose the machinery. The first is we're calling a hopper building. That's where the various aggregate materials and sand will be input to hoppers and then conveyed up into the batch plant. The second is our batch plant building, which is the higher building. That encloses the majority of all the equipment. It gives us the ability to service that without being exposed to the weather. It also gives us a small mezzanine area where there's a control room and where the DOT inspectors will be at the facility doing their inspections. The thought was it also encloses the machinery to reduce the noise and also to enclose the dust component with the facility. So what that does is it primarily deals with our ability to maintain the facility, but the other benefits are one of enclosing the machinery to try and mitigate on the noise, and also helps us control the dust. Other than the building enclosures, this area of the site is relatively unchanged from the prior approval. We're also proposing the truck parking. There's 11 parking spaces there. We're still proposing to have 20 concrete batch trucks on the facility. Parking spaces delineated for 11, and in total, we're proposing 30. We're required to have 38 parking spaces. We're proposing 41 total, between the 30 in the employee parking area and the 11 for the trucks. So we exceed the parking requirement. And then finally, the westerly portion of the site is where we have our stormwater management facilities. Previously, we designed a surface detention facility. We're now proposing an underground facility with a top slab designed to accommodate heavy vehicles. We would like to utilize this area for the handling of materials utilized in the concrete production on that slab. Previously, we had indicated that there was a Bibco washout. We're calling it a Bibco washout. It's a grit separator. That's now enclosed, but that produces a large amount of, when the trucks wash out, it has the leftover aggregates and sand. So that separates the water, introduces the water back into, and recycles the water into the production, and then we extract the sand and aggregates. That material is then stockpiled on the left side on that concrete slab. That allows us to segregate the virgin materials on the right side of the facility, the recycled materials on the left side of the facility, and there are certain mixes that we're allowed to put the recycled material back in. So we want to segregate the areas of the site. That's really one of the primary operational changes that we're introducing here. That area will also be used to process large batches of concrete that return in the trucks that really are not appropriate to be put into the Bibco machine. There are times when a load may get rejected, or there's a short load that comes back. It's a larger volume of material. That material would be then discharged onto that concrete slab, and it's then reprocessed and recycled into the non-virgin materials on that area of the site. So that's an operational process that we are looking to introduce here, that's a necessary byproduct of the batch plant facility. Site circulation remains relatively unchanged with 2 full-service 36-foot wide driveways, both out to Old Waterworks Road. 38 parking spaces are required, as I indicated, and we're proposing 41. Both driveways are 36 feet wide. The width requires a design waiver. That was an element of the prior plan. It was approved previously, and we're seeking a reapproval of that design waiver. Variances, again, are the 15-foot front yard setback to Cheesequake Road, the building height for the batch building, the minimum landscape ratio, and also there is the perimeter fencing that we're proposing. I believe that's a variance. We're proposing 8 feet. The board may recall that was an element of the prior plan. That was approved. That's still an element of this plan. The planner's report indicates that there's an apparent discrepancy between various sections of the ordinance relative to fencing. So we took at the last hearing, I think we took the conservative approach, treated it as a variance, and again, that is required to be reapproved at this time.